Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to our study of life under the sun. Well, Kohelet has been telling us that this life is infected with sin. And he's looked at the different spheres of reality. The highest one of government, the lowest one of people working. Sin is everywhere. And the only answer we have is wisdom. Now, wisdom doesn't fix everything. It can't keep you from dying, but it's still the best weapon we got against this sin-infected world. Now, at this point, Kohelet was to bring us into the darkest sphere possible, to walk on the dark side, the fool. Reminding ourselves that the fool is the one who denies God exists and is as if his teachings and truth are not for us. In other words, it's someone who's really given over to sin. That's the fool. And that's who he's going to present to us. And you want to ask the question, why? Why such a time exploring this dark cave of foolishness? We'll try to answer that. And we'll begin by a transitional verse. Our first verse actually kind of continues with this sense of people working, the common people, but also how sin infects them and brings forth foolishness. You'll see what I mean as we look at verse 11. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. Don't miss this little word advantage. We've seen it last time around. Gain, palpableness, which comes with wisdom. He's not using wisdom. Right? We get it by the fact that he's not using charm. He's not prepared himself to play with the snake. And so he bites him. So the lack of wisdom makes him kind of a fool. And what happens? He gets bitten by a snake. Makes me think of this ancient serpent who has bit humanity and injected his venom of rebellion in all of Adam's posterity. You think I'm pushing it, but no, because as he moves along from this image, he then says this: the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. Two things to note. The first is this use of the mouth, the lips, that kind of brings us back to verse 11. We see that there's a connection because the snake bites with his mouth and he's charmed by the person playing the flute, usually with his mouth. So from that mouth to this mouth, what is the contrast? But we see that there's kind of a break in the fluidity. It's not a one-for-one comparison because he talks about how the wise man's mouth brings him or provides favor, but then you have this idea of consuming instead of bringing forth consequences. He just gets consumed. Kind of breaks the flow. One is favor, one is eating. It forces us to stop and say, okay, what's he saying? Well, he's, again, showing us the contrast. The wise man, the one from before, who knows to prepares his axe so he won't have to cut with more effort. That person, not win him, but more provides favor for others. He blesses others. But the fool, and the one that plays with the snake without preparing himself and gets bitten by it, he gets devoured by himself. Devoured by his foolishness. Devoured by the ancient serpent, maybe. Again, I say all this because now it's time to go deep into this fool, sin-infected person. As he says, the beginning of the words of his mouth, the fool, is foolishness. And the end of his talk is evil madness. We've seen these words before. When Kohelet was telling us about all his studies, how he looked at different religions and philosophies, and he called it foolishness and evil madness. So now he's saying what I've studied is actually what's coming out of the fool's mouth. That's not good. That's not encouraging. What's coming out of their mouth, it's exactly what I've called foolishness and evil madness and stuff that will not lead you to God. Oops. More they talk, and more comes out. It's like they have bad breath, spiritual bad breath, and more they're talking, and more the putrid, disgusting smell is coming out. showing the depth of the ugliness of their heart, how the venom of the serpent has gotten the best of them. And we see it as we continue. Because then he adds, a fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be. This phrase sounds kind of familiar, right? Or something very similar. Yeah, because in chapter 3, which is all about God's sovereignty, all the seasons, and how God does these things that we can't control. And he sets up the future and we can't figure it out. So we stay humble. But this fool who likes to talk about, likes to tell us about these things that God never revealed. I know how the financial world will work. I know about the future that God did not reveal. That's the fool. Take note of that. Put that in your pocket. This notion that he seems to know the future, knows how things work. But he's a fool. He's wrong. God only knows. This is where Kohelet now wants to bring us to the bottom of the barrel, if you will. The exclamation mark as he presents to us this fool and says, the toil of a fool worries him. He's tired. Why? For he does not know the way to the city. Think about how ridiculous that is. He doesn't know how to get in the city? I mean, it's pretty clear what the city looks like. It's big. There's probably some indications. This way to Jerusalem. He doesn't know how to get in. Doesn't know how to get there. Because he's such a fool. But I can't help to, again, say, let's look at the subtlety, the imagery behind it. The city of God. The temple. God's very home. Yeah, this fool, with his efforts, tying himself out to try to get into God's presence, but he'll never do it because he's a fool. Again, I say, a fool is one who denies God exists, but not just like an atheist, but like one who doesn't recognize the God as he has revealed himself and makes his own God. Tries to figure it out by himself and creates all these religions and these efforts he has to do, these religious things you must do to get into a presence of God that he made up. Just like we see still to this day. All these religions, all these things you have to do to get before a severe and angry God who's never appeased by your effort. How tiring. That's the fool. At this point, we start figuring out, why is he presenting us this fool? I think the first part is for these readers who he's trying to reach, to make them understand this is you. You're tying yourself out to get into the presence of God. Not realizing that you don't know the future. You don't understand how it works. And more you speak and more you show, you do not know God. So listen to what I have to say. This is where we have to understand that Kohelet's words are inspired. He is calling them to the one true living God. But I think there's a greater reason. And it's for all these readers of Kohelet who are believers. And it's to warn them. We have to remember that back then, not everybody who was part of the Jewish family were actually true believers and followers of Yahweh. Many of them were idolaters. Many of them bowed the knee before Baal. Right? Their religious efforts to try to reach their God and other gods, just in case. And when they spoke and what they showed, they knew nothing. And their gods never told them the true future. Those lies about how everything was going to be okay, and it never was. That's also true now. See, that's the thing. When you look at epistles like Jude and 2 Peter, you see these same kind of warnings where they're trying to tell us these are what false teachers, false believers, fools look like. Be careful of them. Like that's what Kohelet is doing here. More they speak, more they show they don't know the true and living God. They try to tell us about the future. Remember that? We put in the pocket? Yet they're always wrong. These last couple of years, we have seen how every single modern prophet has been wrong. They spoke with boldness about elections and sicknesses and stuff that's going to happen, And none of it happened like they said. Not one got it right. And yet still people follow them. And here's Kohelet. Here's God saying, they're fools. Why are you listening to them? They cannot lead you to the true place because they don't know it themselves. May we take these warnings seriously. I encourage you, if you know somebody who's stuck in these lies, following these false teachers, share them this simple video, these simple texts. Show them that more you listen, more you realize they don't know God because what they're saying isn't from God's revelation. They say they're getting new revelation, it's always wrong and contradicting itself. And the worst is that they'll never lead you to the true living God, but only give you harder and harder yokes of spirituality, of stuff you have to do. And it never works because it's never from God. Oh, may the Lord help us, dear brothers and sisters. Be blessed.